As I was planning out my videos for this Witcher 3 quest analysis series, I was going to tackle hunting a witch and wandering in the dark together, because I didn't think hunting a witch had quite enough content for a full video. That is until I noticed just how similarly structured this quest is to the Bloody Baron quest, which is interesting because these two main quests are picked up at the same point in the game, and both serve very similar functions for their respective storylines. And spotting those kinds of parallels is precisely why I do these videos in the first place. So here is my Witcher 3 quest analysis on just hunting a witch. This quest begins with Geralt heading to Midcopse to find a village witch who has been helping the villagers with various ailments. Geralt finds said witch, and it is none other than Keira Metz, a character who I had zero familiarity with, but Geralt seemed mighty familiar with her. We get to know a bit about Keira and her highfalutin ways before she reveals that an elven mage was searching for Ciri and Velen. The quest ends with Keira agreeing to take Geralt to the mage because the mage has something that Keira wants. Now, prior to doing this series, I never once noticed the similarities between the Bloody Baron and hunting a witch. Part of that is because the Bloody Baron leads into family matters, one of my favorite story arcs from this game, while hunting a witch leads to wandering in the dark, which is not. But looking at this closely, I can really appreciate how well structured this is. How they give us just a nice, 6 or 7 minute conversation with Keira Metz to get to know her before we actually start to wander in the dark with her. That is exactly what the Bloody Baron did for Philip Strenger before we tackled the meaty Family Matters quest. And as usual, it's really engaging getting to know these characters in The Witcher 3. You see, Keira is quite a character. When you first see her, she is dressed completely different from the common folk of Velen, and there is definitely an air of elitism emanating from her.
Do I look like a dairymaid to you?
And that air becomes a full-fledged hurricane when Geralt begins to engage with her and we learn who she is and just what she thinks of Velen, and frankly everyone. No one can escape her wrath, whether it's Scoia'tael,
No flea-bitten Scoia'tael slob either, but an elven mage.
the villagers,
They'd respect anyone who could produce hemorrhoid cream.
or even dear old Geralt of Rivia himself.
I'm so pleased the world's still able to astound you, Geralt. I actually envy you that sense of wonder. Common in children, knights errant, and morons.
The only person who she doesn't throw shade at is the elven mage looking for Ciri, and as you would expect, it's extremely superficial.
But I liked him. He was intelligent and composed.
So she sounds like she sucks, except there's a dash of that classic CD Projekt Red nuance that permeates the entire game. Keira could have come off as very one-note. We get full view of her personality right away when she sits around in a bathtub in a magical little enclave of her own design, just flaunting everything about herself to Geralt. And it tells us much about who Keira is. Manipulative and not above using her body for her own means. And yeah, Keira definitely plays Geralt in later quests, which is why I really like her impact on his character. We just get all of these really, really fun interactions.
Someone's grown irritable. Is that any way to greet an old friend?
I believe I greeted you with a pleasant view. Now tell me what brings you here.
Her brazen display is clearly her trying to seduce Geralt for her own reasons, but I will say when I first played the game, my Geralt did get seduced because even though she's uppity and snooty, she's also charming, and it's easy to sympathize with her plight when she explains it to Geralt.
I'm in hiding, Geralt. Radovid's new pastime. Pursuing anyone with a whiff of magic about them. Witch hunters. In the north, Radovid's men hunt sorceresses like fish in a barrel. Nilfgaard controls the south. Where was I to flee?
Well, the answer to that riddle is Velen, and judging from what we've seen of this place thus far and what we see of Keira's sensibilities here, this is as far from a match as possible. So her being bitter and mean-spirited towards everyone kind of makes sense. And to top it off, she's separated from any and everyone she could relate to.
Any news of your sisters from the lodge?
None. We can't know too much about one another these days. It's safer that way.
Even tried to contact one another?
I've wanted to many times. But I've no way of knowing who would answer, or who might be listening.
With all this in mind, her being naked at the beginning of the sequence feels less like it's just gratuitous nudity, and more like it's Keira behaving how someone who had lost all semblance of her life and power would behave. And though her being naked here makes it hard on me to edit these videos, it doesn't feel unnecessary like so many nude scenes do in movies, video games, and YouTube videos. But this sequence is not just about learning who Keira Metz, former advisor to King Foltest, is. It's also about getting more essential world building, which is a big reason why I like how this quest is separated from Wandering in the Dark. Without this one, we would get barely any background on the witch hunters and the persecution of mages, other than a quick bit of dialogue during Imperial audience, until we get all the way to Novigrad, which could be like 20 to 30 hours away. This is a huge element of the overarching plot, and it comes into play as you go down Keira's questline, so learning things like this is vital. And it's not just Keira talking about it, one of the townsfolk you talk to also mentions it in a fun little bit.
Witch hunters have been here already?
Nay, but we've heard tell of them. So, when I spied you coming, swords and all, straight away, I thought tales must be true.
I'm a witcher, not a witch hunter.
What? Not one and the same?
No.
And this quest gives us a little breadcrumb trail about Ciri and how there's an elven mage looking for her.
Who are you looking for?
Ciri.
Ciri? Well, now I understand the secrecy, not to mention the brooding, the furled brow. But recently someone asked me about an ashen-haired woman. He claimed she would stand out from the peasant crowd.
And if you go down one dialogue branch with Keira, you get a lot of good background info on Ciri.
No, understand?
Cirilla is here. The girl once sought by the Lodge of Sorceresses, and practically every ruler on the continent has landed here in Velen, and I know nothing of it.
Now, talking about that branching conversation, it's probably a good time to mention just how this quest just doesn't have very many branches at all, because this is a linear quest. And again, just like the Bloody Baron quest, not a bad thing, because we learn so much about Keira and the world here. It helps give the ensuing quest some narrative structure, since Wandering in the Dark is almost pure gameplay. Hunting a Witch, on the other hand, is very story-heavy, but gameplay is the one area it strays into non-linearity, as the only real decision you have to make in this quest is whether you want to ask the townsfolk about the witch, or if you want to find her yourself. And I find it interesting that should you go the second route, there are no Witcher clues to follow. You actually need to find her. Like, you essentially use the Witcher senses in every quest of the game, so this really feels unique in that facet. And while I appreciate them trying to do something different and remove that security blanket here, I don't think it works all that well, because other than these people walking down this path, there doesn't seem to be a natural way of indicating where you can find Keira other than randomly running around mid-cops. Honestly, this feels like a gameplay mechanic that they introduced for this quest and then just scrapped. It's like they tried it out here, realized it wasn't working quite well, and they were like, nope, we're not doing that. As for how this quest ends, well, it ends with Keira agreeing to search for the elven mage with Geralt because the mage has something she wants, which is a constant theme of Keira's storylines. There's always something else at play with her. And I like that there's that tiny bit of setup for her character here, as well as some foreshadowing if you read her notes in her shack about the mage Alexander. Just CD Projekt Red doing CD Projekt Red things and laying out that groundwork so well. Now, if you feel like I laid the groundwork out well for my Wandering in the Dark quest analysis, well, please like and subscribe to my channel. If you don't think I did the groundwork very well, well, here's something that I could say.
I actually envy you that sense of wonder. Common in children, knights errant, and morons.
Oh my god, I did not mean to insult my viewers. That is just not who I am. Here's more of what I would think of you.
Murderers scouring the north from end to end.
Whew, that was a close one.